Hello, everyone. A lot of familiar faces in the crowd, and thanks everybody for coming to our talk today. This is a really fun project to get to share with all of you here and out on the interwebs. My name is Jim Godoldik. I'm a visual effects and virtual production supervisor. This is my buddy Owen Derry.
I'm Owen Derry. I was one of the main Unreal and stage TDs for the duration of the show.
So during our time, because we have to roll back time for Yo Gabba when we started production on this way back in early 2022, I was the head of North America at Dimension and Soup at DNEG 360. Owen worked at Dimension North America as well. There were a lot of partners and a lot of team who couldn't be here today. Hopefully they're watching. But working with a really unique show. And if anybody here had grown up on Yo Gabba Gabba when it came out originally in 2007, this was a lot of the same family, the same team. On the production side, on the creative side, working with the original Yo Gabba Gabba team. So let's dive in. This is a lot of recent work that I've supervised, worked on, Owen's worked on as well. A lot of fun projects. A lot of this, obviously, here talking about virtual production in camera visual effects, mainly all powered by Unreal Engine. So if you haven't seen a lot of these shows, these were really challenging and fun film and TV shows to work on. And the next slide that I have is going to jump into kind of establishing what we did, a little bit of tips and tricks and challenges that we came across during production, and being able to introduce not only the world that everyone knew from Gabba back in the show from like 07 to 2015, but now we're into Yo Gabba Gabba land, which is bringing the loved characters and world and friends and musicians and artists all together, and introducing our new magician, Cam, who is awesome to work with as well, as the new host to guide everybody through Yo Gabba Gabba land. So I'm going to start off with a really fun BTS for all of you from production.
Cheese wonder.
I wonder.
I wonder. I wonder.
Thank you. So that was trying to compress a very long pre-production, concepting, production, pre-pro, all the way through phase of things. Like I said earlier, working with the Yo Gabba team, Christian, Scott, Ben, Josh, Lauren, like everybody, Jordan, there's so many people that once you're part of Yo Gabba Gabba, it is like one giant family, which makes it a lot of fun. Can't forget Parker. Sorry, Parker, if you're watching, but I put you down there just because you weren't in that particular picture. But in this to our left over there, so Christian Jacobs and Scott Schultz are the original creators of Yo Gabba Gabba. Extended family. Scott's brother Ben is up there too. Lots of fun people. But it takes a village. Obviously, a lot of you that have been working on games, TV, film, and been in production, visual effects, and post production knows that when you're blending these technologies, especially for virtual production, it takes all the traditional production teams with new technology teams with real-time and in-camera visual effects. So there's lots more people behind the scenes of making things go, but just a little intro into things. A lot of the teams here, obviously from the Dimension DNEG side, Owen and I were there. Monolith, our partner, who helped us get those 900 some odd panels up into a workable volume with the engineering back end. Obviously, the rest of the Yo Gabba team, WildBrain as a production company, and our friends at Apple who made this all happen too. So going into when we first got the call for this in early 2022, I was working on a kids show in New York City around the same time that Yo Gabba Gabba originally came out on Nickelodeon. And it had at that time too, nothing like it was out. It was very traditional, hand-painted, lots of green screen, blue screen, very much as what I guess Christian would even talk about. It was very kind of artistic music, skater style of like DIY, get it all together, have all your friends come and help, paint set deck for hours on end and tell really amazing stories and have lots of amazing friends join. If any of you had seen the original Gabba series and been fans of it, you know how many amazing artists, musicians, and special guests they had. Everybody from, Mark Mothersbaugh to Tony Hawk to Jack Black, and the list goes on and on. Obviously early of, Beat of the Day with Biz Markie and lots of other famous musicians that just made that show very original and very cool. So getting into how do we take the stories and the look of Yo Gabba Gabba and bring it to now using new technologies like virtual production and Unreal Engine. So here's a little bit of our project timeline. We started initially talking to the team in early 2022. We did a test because we all had to prove this, not only prove that the technology could work for this show to the Gabba team, but also help prove a proof of concept to Apple to greenlight it. So we started doing our passes for the initial test as VAD in early 2022. We did a test shoot with Monolith on their stage in LA. And then from there, the Gabba team put together basically a sizzle of what we put together as a sequence and brought it back to WildBrain and to Apple to get the green light. Luckily, they got the green light and things kind of hit the gas pedal pretty quick going into the summer of 2022. going into something that was really interesting of being invited to the kickoff for the writer's room. I think it's really important for those of us that are working in virtual production and using tools like Unreal Engine for integrating into traditional media. That would be, Gabba was always done as 2D. And how do you onboard, an art team, a camera team, a production designer, an entire art department to get familiar with tools they've never used before, like Unreal Engine, and shooting an entire show on an LED volume. So one of the big things that we had after we did this LA test was sat down at dinner right after that test and basically telling Christian to trust us, because there was this big thing of something that was very special with Gabba was the look and the feel of Gabba. That hand-painted 2D, you could see the brushstrokes, on all the set pieces, like how they weren't sure how that was going to translate over as CG assets and especially onto an LED volume. So that was one of the big things that I told Christian and Scott that night at dinner was like, trust us. We can make it look just like your 2D assets and just like your set deck that you had. So finishing through the schedule here is pretty traditional of going through concepting and look dev, building the volume. We shot this in Park City at a very nice new stage out there. So we were out in Utah building this and testing early in fall going into winter of 2022, and then we started principal photography in January of 2023, and that took us through till spring, because there was also an LA unit, and then we had some pickups that we had to do. So as soon as I finished on volume stuff, I went over to LA and VFX supervised the other stage stuff that we had in LA as well. And then it went live August 9th. And if you haven't seen it, please watch it. It is awesome. The 10 episodes that are up there, you can binge watch them with your kids. Doesn't matter how old you are. It's awesome. Really big thing that I think a lot of us learned here is communication is key. Just like you would have in any traditional production workflow, is communicating with fellow HODs, the different departments that you have, especially in virtual production, working with different teams, from translation of just the technology between a traditional art department and a virtual art department. There's a lot of geeky, fun technology that you have to break down for a camera team that's never worked with this, with a production designer, an art director, of just where you're placing things. Like what they don't, a lot of this team had never stepped foot on an LED volume, let alone even knew what Unreal Engine was. Got any input for that one, Owen?
Yeah, I think it was very collaborative effort between everybody, and I think we were fortunate enough that everybody was super open and happy and accepting of all the ways. So that was really cool. I know camera team I worked with very closely, just doing day in day out operating stuff on the volume. I kind of got like absorbed into part of the camera team because I'm controlling the big light behind them, so that's something that they was very important. So it's you just really nice to work with those people that were open to all the new stuff we were bringing.
So this is some BTS pictures from our volume test in LA that we first did, with a quicker approach to the volume storyboards that we have there. We did start off this project in 427. It was early enough that Unreal Engine 5 was not out, and myself and Ed, our head of real time at Dimension, were going back and forth of like, when UE5 dropped, was it going to be production ready to take on a whole TV series? And a good thing with our partners at Epic, we got that assurance that it was going to be ready for us. Earlier in taking a leap into early engine versions on Pinocchio, Callum and I from Dimension had to make the decision with Ed as well to dive into be the first feature film to use 427 at the time. And there were features in each engine version that we would lock to for production for very specific reasons of why we would go to that. So we started off, we did the test in 427. We started off building VAD in 427, and we're priming production to go UE5 as soon as it was ready and it was stable. So some production challenges. Like I said, onboarding different production teams, all the way from producers to all of your traditional production teams and tech teams that were not familiar with the technology, what the capabilities of what Unreal Engine could deliver, and then just shooting styles. It is intimidating for people to understand the technology because it takes a lot for ICVFX to come together. And it's definitely more of us on the virtual production and ICVFX teams having to be a cohesive integrator with all the other departments. We all have to kind of flow through as one single unit, because if something is going wrong with camera unit, with camera tracking, we've got all these different things that kind of just have to seam together to get the shots done that we need. One big thing that I know Owen really wants to talk about is our color management pipeline. So because this was an Apple delivery, it right off the bat, it is an HDR delivery. So we had to go through and develop our calibration process, our stage process, and know that we were going to be working in ACES 1.0 with both monitoring in SDR and HDR, which made our whole signal flow setup very interesting. And working with Bradley, our DIT on set, made that a lot easier. Anything you want to chime in color management?
Yeah, color management. It's a lot to worry about, at least on my end for the thing, because while we were in the previs, and as the artists on the London side were delivering content, or here's the volumes, here's already, I think we had 22 volumes?
22.
Something like that. So as you know, and we didn't have them all on the first day of shooting. They kind of gradually got sent out in waves. So directors and stuff, they're looking at these renders of these volumes, and then you put it up on the wall and you go, doesn't look like that. So that was the main thing there, is having color consistency and being okay. Because also biggest thing with volumes I find is a lot of people look at it with their eyeballs and they go, this doesn't look that good. I'm like, okay, well, one, you're not looking through the camera. That's also the big thing. So it only makes sense really through the camera because we're calibrated to the camera sensors and there's lenses and all that stuff going on. And it only works if you're the gag only works if you're in that camera. So that's also a big thing in the beginning, at least, was okay, we have to look at it through the camera. Ignore your eyes are lying to you right now. The camera's the only thing that matters. So yeah, once you get that kind of dialed in, and it started to get easier. Everybody starts trusting, and that was much better. But yeah, the color consistency right off the bat is one of the biggest things to always be aware of, I think, when you're working on these walls.
Yeah, and anybody that's getting into this or has been doing this a long time too know color management is tricky. It is not something that you always can take from one project to the next. There's all different project parameters. You could be shooting at a bespoke stage, like we had this, built for, specifically designed and built for this show, versus a standing stage. So, what we do at a bespoke stage might be totally different than any of the standing stages that you may work at globally. Another key thing that we'll talk about a little bit more in depth coming up too is really just matching the stylistic, hand-drawn, hand-painted, very artistic, art-directed look of Yo Gabba Gabba as a whole, and making sure that it didn't look, as Christian put it and Scott put it, it didn't look like a video game. And you'll hear a lot of that, especially with ICVFX and virtual production, is do the assets look too gamey, especially for a stylistic show like this? And then that's a big thing to do is like working on stylistic shows versus photoreal shows. There's definitely different approaches to how your materials, textures, assets as a whole, what the pipeline will be going through. And this one I think it challenged all of us in this way. Is like it looks amazing, and it was challenging in matching what the 2D look was, knowing that we were going like a full CG route. And then the other part too that we didn't jump into is from the back end process of that is the port first back end. So basically our source control back end. Thankfully, our buddy Luis as well, helping us kind of get through how we were setting things up company-wide at Dimension DNEG in going back and forth with our teams at Dimension and at DNEG because of the global stages we were working at and the different projects is setting up pipelines of how assets get shared that right way. So a lot of the stuff that we were doing on the Perforce side was how we were working during VAD versus how we would be operating stage level. So a lot of the stuff that we were doing, we were having multiple depots, multiple streams on the Perforce side. It made it much easier too when VAD would push something and we would have different streams where it became much easier that the stage stream never got touched. It was basically, that's when things were approved and ready to move to stage to get final optimization before it was shoot ready. So a lot of this takes a lot of setup. So luckily what we had, is we had R&D teams, we had dev teams, we had developers creating a lot of these assets. And, we had very smart friends like Luis helping us with all this Perforce management, as well as Mark and the rest of our team in London. So this gives us a good look. This is a lot of the amazing work that Lauren and Kurt and the rest of the art team and art department and construction crews were doing. So this is all of the set deck and props and things. And you can see this is all the original show. Everything is hand painted, amazing artists and crafts persons. And the tricky part I would say is carpet is a major pain in the butt. For many reasons of why we will talk about, but when we originally did our test on the first go back in early 2022, the flooring was vinyl. And I would suggest for camera tracking and any IR and just light bounce is please don't shoot vinyl if you don't have to. It creates a lot of problems with lighting and camera tracking. Not that carpet doesn't either because of lighting and camera angles, but carpet was way better, and if you could do paint, that's even better than that. So here's our side-by-sides of our practical to digitals, and we went back and forth. I had a whole time scheduled of basically scanning all of our assets. We didn't have to do that in the end. We were very selective of what did and didn't get scanned, and going back and forth with the art team to go, it was a little dance. Who's gonna lead? Are you gonna take our VAD and virtual production workflow as to what we look dev are you going to then create? And we came to a little bit of a middle ground of lead from VAD and look dev into how they were going to be approaching the props and set deck. So it was definitely a marriage between multi-departments here, between virtual production and VAD and set deck and production design and art department. I know you want to talk about our asset management in terms of this in materials and textures and the difficulty we had to do to get around some of this stuff.
Yeah, so for our assets here, like the background assets and whatnot, we had a lot of control. I know that in the beginning there's a lot of hesitancy with they didn't want it to look too video gamey, and what they meant by that I think was they wanted the imperfections that you get when people are crafting, the props. So having all these, normal maps and all these stuff we had made in the textures to have the control, and so they don't look too cookie cutter, and so they're all a little bit variations between them. I think once they saw those and what that looked like up on the wall, they were like, "Oh wow, it looks great! Like, awesome!" That was a big part of it. And then yeah, for the landscape stuff, for our the background, the actual ground on it, it's difficult because normally when you're doing, I guess, photoreal volume work, right? It comes with a different set of challenges, but you can put bushes or whatever you want sort of at the end to hide the seams between, the actual practical set and then your volume. This show, it was flat, so it was hard. And especially with some of the angles you get at the carpet, because there's like the sheen over the carpet. So, if you're down low, it's a lot lighter color as opposed to if you're up high. And we didn't have that baked into our landscape material. So I just ended up throwing CCRs on it to fix it, which has its own set of problems. But I think it turned out, looks pretty good in the end. And I think it holds up pretty well.
Yeah. And this is just a little higher level overview of kind of our process between virtual and practical when it comes to our assets. A lot of heavy work too, and make sure we give a shout out to our buddy Christian Frausig, who was our VAD Soup, and Jess Lee as well on our London side, working with this. And one thing that did benefit of having a good section of our VAD team in London was when we finished on prep or anything for that, we could do turnarounds, and we could do basically quick dailies over back to the team in London. And when we were sleeping, they were working. If we were sleeping, because we stayed up pretty late sometimes. But there was a lot of testing that we did in prep. And one thing I would definitely say is, if you are the supervisor in kind of helping shepherd the pixels through for production teams and producers and writers and all of that, is really, I don't want to say fighting, but sometimes it feels like you have to fight with production to get this stuff, is really having them understand the schedule time of having pre-light and enough sessions with all of the other decision makers, so you're not caught out there on the day. And things will always come up. It always did. It happened a lot for us. There were things that we ran into, engine side, production side. Camera cranes may have gone down. Things happen. Maybe sometimes you might have a crane that the head breaks. And as Owen said earlier, we had multiple volumes. So one big thing that was kind of directed early on from Christian and Scott and Parker and the rest of the team was, nobody had ever really seen Yo Gabba Gabba, the worlds explored. So each character has an associated world and an associated look. And there's the color schemes, which made things both look really good, but also be really tricky in terms of, how we built our assets, how we tested things, and also the color management pipeline was, the characters like Broby and Fufa and Muno and Tootie, they all have their color schemes per world. And Christian really early on with Scott wanted to build full 360 environments, because the way that all the lands come together is kind of like a pie chart. So it brings everybody together and they all meet, because in one section of the shows they're off in Broby Land, or they're off in Muno's world, and they come together or they travel through, depending on the story. So the way that we had to set these up too is to make this workable and modular within shooting ICVFX too, is being able to break this down, because you can imagine if we had built one master level and we didn't break things down into into sequences and sublevels and manage this, it would have been extremely heavier than we already had to deal with on like a scene tax level. And in terms of hitting target frame rates, for the show, for our target frame rate was shooting 24 frames a second. So always going with the rule of doubles, especially for ICVFX and frame rate, is always wanting to double the frame rate of what your base of your project is. This is more back to what Owen and I were talking about earlier in terms of setting up the materials and how we were looking through things early on. And there's a lot of really cool assets early on too that our buddy Steve Tolkowski was working on, and a lot of the concept and look dev. And I know Steve's watching, so I want to give him a shout out too, is how we were taking looks from Gabba side with Parker and his art direction from the earlier shows and making that look seamless, because there were assets that would come back and relive in Gabba land from the traditional show too. So this is just a little overview of our, kind of our assets that would be reused quite a bit throughout the show. Here's a little, this was really, I think, a key thing for onboarding is previs and techviz, more so pre-visualizing and doing these quick renders out from our side for camera teams. So Brandon, our DP, to go through, Roger, our gaffer, to look at lighting from our side, with Garrett, who is setting up the lighting plots from Monolith, is really just getting where things were going to be, camera placement. We're looking at things too of where our OptiTrack cameras were going to be placed in there, and plotting all of this stuff out. So this is just really very early previs of like having our volume back here just to show what movement is, and being able to say, hey, Brandon, you know what? Within our tracking volume, if you're on the crane and you're on a zoom at this height, we would set a height distance for him and say, hey, you know what? Past 18.5 feet, you're going to start to get out of the volume from a tracking area. He would have roughly bounding boxes from how to tell his operators what to look out for. So what we would do is we would show the previs. It would help inform. He'd be able to look at lensing. Christian Scott and the rest of the team, because a lot of the show is all driven off of music and audio and 2D animation, is looking at the timings. And this is really helpful to have a lot of the worlds be set through in previs and techviz. Want to add anything?
Yeah, kind of just, I think, showing them like the capabilities of the volume, and prevising out some of these early shots was pretty fun. I think I did most of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, just rendering them out and going.
Yeah, and Philip.
And Philip, yeah, we did a lot of
Philip Ramirez. So here's some here's some turntables of our environments. So going through, as I said, each character is very specific in their color schemes. And when we show you another piece from the final, you'll see that blending of the physical and digital is always a really hard thing to do in ICVFX. Using different tools in Unreal Engine, using different hardware, especially, I implore you all to make sure that you are using color management in your pipelines. Using OCIO, using ACES, using just proper color management. It will save you a lot of heartache to set it up very early when you're working with artists or individually or small teams. It'll save you a lot of heartache of having to kind of redo work later. So these are different environments. This is one of my favorites too with Underground. So what's good about this, and what Owen talked about earlier too, is selling the look, because that's a really big thing of selling a look from look dev and virtual art department, and getting a DP, director, production designer, art team going like, well, this looks great. How is it going to look on the volume? And when Owen mentioned of like, be at Video Village or look through the viewfinder, make sure you're looking through, your small HD or your Flanders or whatever it is. don't be thrown off by just looking at the wall itself, because you're looking at a totally different render of what you need. Even looking from your viewport, unless you're looking at a calibrated monitor, things are going to be off. And doing animation as well, putting a little Niagara and shader to make it look like 2D artwork, which is really rad of the new Toon shader look that's coming up in 5.5 and beyond. So it's cool to see the updates in 5.5. So when we went production ready for this, we were on UE5. We were the first show to use UE5, which is really cool. It's also a little bit of a risk. Technology-wise, so we get into the weeds here on the tech, is choose wisely. I had a really great conversation with Brandon early on, our DP. I think also being a DP myself and coming from camera, having that kind of camaraderie with the camera team, as Owen brought up earlier too, is Brandon and the team were very open and to suggestion of what would do well in a volume. We had choices of a couple different camera platforms for this one. We went with the Mini LF. We went with Zooms. Originally the show was all shot on Zooms, and because of the amount of setups that we had to get through, the type of shooting and styling, we decided to go with Zooms instead of primes, just because calibrating lenses is also not a chore you want to be doing all the time of swapping multiple lenses, especially if a DP has a lens that they just pull out of a case and say, hey, can you have this ready by this afternoon? We could do it, but it would behest you to calibrate all your stuff during prep. And also that handy little box that is right there is a lifesaver. That is the DCS Fizz box. We were using actually the LDT version 1. This is the version 2, which was wireless. But that is an awesome metadata recorder that allows us to capture all of our Fizz information. And there's a live link plugin for that we can take direct into Take Recorder, which is really important for metadata capture and having all of your camera tracking, lens info, sensor info, all coming into a one database that we created per show. Some of our tech partners. So obviously Epic, a lot of the tools that we use between Epic, between Megascans to reality capture, Technoprops for their amazing technology that we use too, from the Technoprops crowns, tracking help set up with our buddy Tom Armbruster at 29 Group. We used row panels. We were using BP2 V2s. We had 900 of them, and Cream Source for lighting. We were the whole show was lit with SpaceX and Vortex 8s, and Brompton for our processing technology. This is the back end view of our volume. So this was the bespoke volume that was built in Park City. We started off there in November of 2022, and this volume lived until April of 2023. We spent a lot of time on this volume. This is our lighting plot. So Garrett Kane, who was on with us as well, set up our lighting plot. You can see on the back side of this, here's our volume. Here's all our SpaceXs that our gaffer Roger had set up, and on the back here is all our vortexes. We did have a bunch of others, and we have some vortexes back here. We did have some other fixtures that would fly in of other vortexes in grids and set up if Brandon and Roger felt that they needed to come in. The fun techie part here, end display, and looking at our layout. We had a lot of engineering into this. So this is traditional end display workflow. setting it up with 6 outputs. We had, how many render nodes we run through on this one?
We had 6 render nodes. We only had 5 of them going at the same time, though. I
And
think
then we had some spares.
then we had some spare at 3 workstations. I think we did end up using the 6th render node because our 5th one blew up at some point.
It just,
have to
it
swap
just
it
didn't want to power out.
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, all the render nodes running NVLink dual A6000s were, even though this is stylistic and it wasn't photoreal, we're still pushing through some pretty hefty scenes through that. And this is what it looks like from the front view for us. So you can see too, one of the interesting things that we had with Lauren and Kurt was building the platform here. And the tricky part too is you're dealing with this blend line. You know, sometimes it's a floor, sometimes it's a rostrum, sometimes it's a stage. And going through a lot in prep is, that's Brandon right there, is going through and understanding kind of what the limitations are from camera angles, because you have a gap between the stage at times. It could be a few inches, it could be 1.5 feet, it could be even more, depending on how big your volume is. So that's one thing of using TechViz and previs is being able to say, hey, Brandon, if you're up at this angle and you're dutched at this and you're looking down, we're gonna shoot through that gap. And we don't wanna do that. Break the illusion of the blend. For the really techie folks, this is what a lot of our signal path and engineering look like. Our good buddy Eric Kohler at Monolith at this time was very thorough of setting up what our signal path and networking pipeline going on, because we had a lot of it to power 900 panels with processing. And for our friends that are very into signal flow chain, we were 3 cameras. And because this was both monitoring in SDR and HDR, our DIT, Bradley, had set up back and forth with myself what this path would look like from the virtual production team through to Video Village and for dailies to the post team. So it gets pretty geeky in here in terms of like what we're going through, you know, what's hopping through in terms of LUTs. We had a base LUT. We didn't do anything too crazy in terms of look. We used a lot of the base LUTs from Ari for this because the show's very saturated. It's very colorful. So we had to be really careful too of just making sure, you know, we weren't out of scope in terms of our HDR workflow for our final delivery. Near and dear to my heart, project metadata. So this was actually something I'd set up on a previous film and that we had working internally at Dimension and DNEG, which we had called, you know, content management and digital continuity. So for every day of prep and every day of shoot, we had all of the metadata captured on set. That is camera and lens info, sensor info, take recorder info, all of it that we had dumped out into these. And at each end of day report that I would do, this would get sent over as a virtual production dailies. So just like you would have camera reports, this is basically the virtual production camera report, if you will. And they dove down into everything of, you know, scene, take, engine version, any of operator or camera tracking operator notes that we would have up here, and then it would be all corresponding by working with our script supervisor as well. So we'd be taking kind of slate info from our script supervisors and making sure that it all fed into what it is. It's actually, I've updated this quite a bit, so I have this all automated now. So that it can dump out through Python scripts into whichever database you're doing, take recorder info to I still call it shot grid, production flow tracking, whatever Autodesk calls it these days, or whatever, you know, custom shot management and content management tools you can use. You can just use Python scripts to get this stuff out as XMLs or any other format. You want to talk about the versatility of using the volume for more than just ICVFX?
Yeah, so the great thing about having a big monitor behind you when you're shooting on is you can use it for whatever else you sort of want to do. So we use it a lot for, we use it at times for blue screen. You have a traditional blue screen, or if they want tracking markers on it, throw tracking markers up. You can do green screen, you can do whatever. One of the things that we did for pretty much every shot, whether or not we were using our actual volumes as backgrounds or not, is outside of the frustum, we just had white on everything. And that was to sort of get rid of hard shadows, because that was one of the things about the show. It's very soft shadows. There's no shadows, quote unquote. But so having basically an entire fill outside of the frustum was something that Brandon was super happy to have. So that's some of the capabilities of shooting on a volume that just live outside of normal volume work.
Yeah, and DPs and gaffers really love the capabilities of being able to build lighting tools in Unreal really quick. Owen and Philip and RJ were throwing light cards of different shapes and making gobos, and there's a lot of things that in Unreal that you can whip up really quickly, whether it's in part of a template, something as a blueprint or editor utility widget. It offers that capability of having a giant softbox that is an LED volume available to you, and then being able to pipe it through there. One thing that was really good that we didn't do, but is capability, especially with the cream source lights, is we basically can gen lock the cream source lights into that, because there's a frame sync technology that will allow you to sync things up. So if you're shooting high speed, you need to gen lock everything, whether you're working on like DMX or streaming ACN workflow. There's a lot of cool features that you can do with like the SpaceX's and the Vortex series that we really like, and we've been using. I think I've used the SpaceX's, the Vortex 8s, and the 4s pretty much on every show that I've done in the past 2 years. And obviously, there's a lot of other lights out there. It's just there's a lot of cool features within the cream source lights that you get really nice color out of them too. Tips and tricks. So one thing that we had that we use till to this day is using validation templates, benchmarking templates, projects for both testing with VAD and stage teams of being able to load even external vendors' assets and benchmark them with project templates. So that's one thing I could really suggest is using validation templates if you have a standing stage versus bespoke stages. Having these things as benchmark tools are really helpful to have in UE5 as well. Your favorite, CCRs and CVARs?
Yeah, a lot of CCRs everywhere. That was, that was basically my bread and butter when it comes to blending anything, because at the time we didn't have any color correct windows, and that came in 5.2, I believe, and we were in 5.0. So it was just, I was throwing up so many CCRs and everything. And then, optimization was a whole nother battle, because normally our artists, they did a good job of trying to keep things light, but the biggest thing was lighting. Shadows are like hardest. We had, I think, every volume had at least 2 or 3 directional lights in them, and when those are casting shadows, it's a big hit on performance. So there's a lot of balancing to do, sometimes per shot, of trying to get the most out of console variables, and then like what your LOD settings are, what your shadow quality settings are. Anti-aliasing is another big one. So like basically, it's a dance of trying to keep everything to look the best, but also keep it hitting at a 24 per second.
Yeah, and then especially with the aliasing based off of camera tracking, camera angle, and lighting. This is why it's really important to previs and techvis. Your shots with that is we would run into issues based off of how some of the assets might have been built, and knowing kind of where the move is going to be, if it was going to be a big sweeping move on a crane, looking at where the lighting was for the virtual setup versus our physical. So we would have to, on the fly, move assets around. It could be because a material or texture was giving you a little pop, and you're not really going to know that until you get on stage and into prep and audition your moves to look at where everything's going to go. That's why I say it's really important to get that, pre-light and prep time, which we talk about. So this is just a lot of the fun people. This doesn't even cover all the musicians, special guests, and artists we had. For everybody from Flea to the Linda Lindas, Thundercat, Mark Rober, Anderson .Paak, Mark Mothersbaugh, lots of really cool, Kurt Vile, Portugal the Man. But I would just implore everybody to go watch the episodes out there on Apple TV now, because it's really awesome. And I think we have another
Come on, let's turn up. We gotta show 'em what
little
it's
section
like.
from Anderson .Paak, but really good to kind of, when it goes into the wide shot, to take a look at just how well the blend works from physical to digital.
A world below, underneath the ground. Let me show you all the good things. There's beauty all around. There's magic in the dirt you see. It's Mother Nature's energy. All the plants and all the trees sing along to the melody. I said, hey, we're connected. Roots underground. Hey, we're connected. Roots
I don't think there was one person that stepped foot on or in and around the volume when everything was dressed and all the assets were up that didn't kind of go, whoa, this is crazy. Just because the whole benefit of shooting ICVFX and being able to do this is to put musicians and actors and actresses and all the different departments into this world. It's a really great benefit of why virtual production has taken off so much, especially more in the past couple of years. Can you imagine the cost of having to build the set at the depth and at the range that this would be? It would be astronomical. And that's really the benefit of using real-time tools like Unreal Engine with this, is to be able to extend and bring out, these worlds. I mean, when you're standing here in the volume and looking back into that, having Christian and Scott and Parker, Jordan and the rest of the team and Josh, stand on the stage and look into it, that it feels like you can just walk off into that underground back there. It's a lot more than this, but a bunch of the core team, between Christian Frausig, our VAD Soup, Joe Statham, who couldn't be here with us today, but I'm sure he's watching. Philip and Brian Doman and RJ and Jess and Garrett and Rich, Valerie, Scott and Hugo, the rest of the teams in London and at Monolith. There's a lot of people involved in this. So here's some awesome wins for us. First TV show to use UE5 for more than 80% of the show. That's one thing too you see is like, well, how much virtual production or how much Unreal Engine was actually used on a feature film, a TV show. And you always hear about, oh, well, we just use it for these inserts, or we just used it for car processor or that. The great win here about this show is the creatives and production team fully bought into using Unreal Engine and virtual production for that. So it's like, not only is this a huge win for us, but it's a huge win for the industry as well, to have a successful show like this use Unreal and virtual production tools so well. We were on set a lot, over 80 days on volume from prep through to wrap, which is quite a lot. Started in November, finished up in April, as we said. Did some more pickups on another volume in June, and then it went into post. Not that post didn't start right as we were working as well. Winning over the team, who had a little skepticism that we could reach the look of CG assets looking like they were hand-painted assets. And that's a real testament to not only to Owen and all his hard work on set with Philip and RJ and everybody, but our VAD team too in London just did amazing work. And it was a lift to really get the Gabba team to be like, I can't tell the difference. Christian even called out one day on set. He was like, "Can you move that tree?" And we're like, that's a physical tree. You know, that you're gonna have to get our team to do that. So that was like nice win for us. He couldn't
Best
tell.
compliment ever is like, oh, can you? It's like, oh,
It would be like,
that's real.
yeah, that's real, guys. You gotta move that. That's our asset behind that is the virtual one. Yeah, like Owen was saying too, multiple uses. You know, sometimes it would be just throwing up light cards and throwing up, you know, gradient ultra dynamic skies as like an option because, you know, Brandon or, you know, Christian or Scott or somebody would just want to pick off a shot. So what would we do? You know, there's definitely trial by fire because this was Owen's first real big project. And he did an amazing kick-ass job being lead on set TD. And, you know, he did a lot of heavy lifting in terms of, you know, fixing a lot of issues that we came into too, as well as, you know, Philip and RJ. So obviously big kudos to Owen. And critical feedback, you know, obviously we were in touch with Epic the whole time with this, since we were the first ones that I knew of to run fully on a production for UE5. The communication back and forth between the TAMs and Epic has always been great for us, and there's always been amazing feedback, you know, from Epic in terms of listening to feedback, and also sometimes when you have critical production work going on, you know, Epic has even sent out people on set with us. So, you know, really big key thing to have a partner like Epic be kind of right there with us as we're, you know, breaking new ground. It looks amazing. I don't know. I tell everybody to go watch it because it's out streaming now on Apple TV, and hopefully Apple and WildBrain will give us a season 2. And that is kind of the wrap.